Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to Vertica Unify 2022. Well, please keep coming in. Fill up the room. We'll look good with my boss. But this has been a long time coming. Isn't it great to be back in Boston? It's incredible to be back together again. So really, thank you all for joining. We've got a great lineup of speakers here for the general session, and as well as the breakout session. Promise got a great event. We've been planning this for a long time. I'm going to give a little bit of a retrospective. I see a lot of faces here, people at the very first Big Data conference, when Big Data was a thing. We're going to rename it since then. But as far as the general session speakers, I want you all to meet them. Everyone's available. That's a great thing about Vertica. Brought a big contingent of our engineering team. If you're a customer, you get to meet the engineers that have built the features. Best practices engineers. We've got a great contingent to make and continue being successful with Vertica. But after I finish up my preamble, I'm going to hand it off to Scott Richards. Scott Richards is Vice President and General Manager of Vertica. Scott's going to give a little bit of an industry perspective, and then also dive in a little bit on why we are so customer-driven. And then Bert Corderman from the Trade Desk, Senior Engineering Manager. He's going to show you a use case that's going to blow your mind as far as the amount of data and the analytics that are crunched through Vertica up on AWS and taking a multi-cloud strategy. And then we have Steve Walkauskas and Dave Sprogis, Director of Product Management and Director of R&D. They're going to dive into a new release that I don't want to let the cat out of the bag because Scott's going to cover that. But should be a press release hitting the wire very soon with lots and lots of functionality. One thing to know about Vertica, releases come out, functionality comes out every 2 months. Incredible. They just crank out the features. We had an incredible customer advisory board yesterday, and it was interesting. There were some new people to the board, and they said, are these typically how these meetings are? Because typically they've gone to other customer advisory boards where they were throwing things, or where's my feature, move off you, or what have you. Much more of a partnership. I think that was kind of the key word. Talking to Steven, talking to Chuck, saying, hey, have you ever thought of this? Taking Vertica this way? Hey, let's discuss it. Always very open conversations, totally customer first. And then John Mao, Global Head of Business Development from Vast Data, a very, very cool company. And our platinum sponsor is going to cover a session, and it's titled Unified Analytics Meets Unified Storage. Very, very cool session. You're going to want to catch that in a little bit. And then there's Rohit Amarnath, CTO of Vertica. Ro is always on the cutting edge, checking out, making sure that we've got our ducks in a row in the future. Give you a glimpse into the future and the vision of Vertica. Oh, one thing Bruce mentioned, please silence your phones if you have them on right now. That'll help. We have a lot of people tuning in. I want to welcome them as well to the general session that are being streamcast right now. But of course, first we want to thank our customers, right? That's why we're here. This is what we do every single day from everyone in the organization. We're committed to our customers, right? These logos and many other logos that we can't share that I wish we could, marketing for the customer advisory board, kind of the who's who of marquee data-driven organizations that push the limits with Vertica. When you've hit a wall with another alternative solution, and I'm coming to Vertica, Vertica saves the day and makes you guys look like heroes, but we appreciate your support. Also want to thank our sponsors. So thank you again to our platinum sponsor, Vast Data. If you have an analytical workload where you're going to run on-prem or in hybrid, and you want kind of a cloud-native approach to it, Vertica and Vast have an incredible solution. Definitely learn more about that. And also driving value from very, very large volumes of data. They're actually saving Hadoop's gravy. And then thank you to our gold sponsors. We've got Climb Channel Solutions, outside, a key distributor for us, Arrow is as well, and then Vicinity. Definitely meet with Vicinity. We had a press release on Monday with them. Very, very cool technology. The kind of summarize, it's enterprise get real-time access to distributed data no matter where it is. That's a key theme that we're seeing out there in terms of many prospects that we speak to. They say, hey, we know Vertica is screaming fast. I've got this data in X format, Parquet. I want you to be able to read it in place. And through companies with partners like Vicinity and all the different technologies he has with complex data types and some of the sessions we're covering, you can derive value from that data outside of Vertica. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit of a retrospective. I had to get a little nostalgic. It's been nearly 10 years since our first big data conference. And I know I see the faces. Some of you have been there, and some of you haven't. You're like, who are those two guys in the middle? That's Nate Silver from 538. And then you also have Billy Bean was one of our keynote presenters. Billy Bean was played by Brad Pitt in Moneyball. Really, really cool. Boston's a special place to me. It's a special place for Vertica. It's where we were born. It's where we grew. And I'm just psyched to have it back in Boston. But somewhere along the line, big data became an old term, and we needed a new name. So the marketing team went out to our local watering hole. We came up with some really great names, some really, really bad names we won't go to. And we came up with the Vertica Big Data Conference becomes Vertica Unify and Vertica Unify 2022. And the tagline here is bringing analytics together worldwide. What do we mean by that? Well, this year we're going global with the conference, right? So we've got many people that are joining virtually. I know we spoke with many, many customers, particularly with our sales team, meeting with the customers and saying, hey, you got to come to the event. And they couldn't, they really wanted to. But we got a good contingent, and we said, let's go worldwide with this. I can't imagine a more beautiful place to be than in Paris in late June. So any of you haven't booked your vacations yet, you may want to go there as well. Lots and lots of customer sessions there. We're finalizing the agenda yesterday, and another customer, which is pretty rare, came to us and said, hey, I really want to share my story. It happens all the time. It's an amazing situation versus begging them to go and present. We don't want that. So that's Paris. And then APJ. What's cool about APJ, it's virtual. It was tough trying to find an area within Asia that worked for everyone, such a massive landmass, of course. But it's localized in 4 languages, right? So we're really going global with Vertica Unify this year. I'm really excited about that. So why Unify? Why the name? Why does it matter? Why is this marketing guy talking about Unify? What does it mean to you? Well, the first part of it was a couple of years ago. We're in the middle of the pandemic, and we thought, let's come up with a new name, because big data was a little bit passé, but we also want to kind of put a vision in terms of a time when we can get together again. And here we are. This is really, really cool. And of course, it's always about the people, but it's also about our messaging in terms of our platform and what do you get from Vertica, right? And it's around unified analytics. I share this because you're going to hear this theme throughout all the presentations throughout the show. And it's more than just a catchy tagline or a phrase. It really does encompass everything that Vertica can deliver for you. So we hear all the time, I think I just mentioned, data-driven insights, they don't want to move the data, right? That's okay. You want in-database machine learning because you don't want to downsample. Downsampling often leads to inaccuracies in your models. You want predictive analytics, but you don't want to get gouged, right? You don't want to, spoke with a customer the other day, actually last night, and they said, Vertica is unlike any other vendor that I've ever worked with. A lot of other vendors, you sell something, and you come back a year later and you sell something more. It doesn't happen with us, right? We work really closely with you, and it's very, very predictable pricing, all in one. Concurrency without performance disruptions. The list goes on and on. Database software without hardware restrictions, no bill shock. And what that brings is Vertica delivers unified analytics, right? It is absolutely the #1 analytical database with so much more to unify. The convergence of data warehouses and data lakes. I think nearly every organization is talking about that. Telecommunications, financial services, that's why we have partners like Vast Data, partners like Vicinity helping with that, right? There was a massive investment in these data lakes, and let's just face it, they didn't get the value from it. And we knew it, and we told a lot of the prospects, but for various reasons, they end up building out those data lakes, and that's fine. We're going to help them derive value from it, help you. MPP with storage options, SQL machine learning, operationalizing machine learning. I would say if there's one thing, there's deployment options, clouds, on-premise, Kubernetes, at the edge. The list goes on and on and on. Our customers will speak with product management and R&D and say, hey, can you support this OS? Can you support this other type of object store? If there's a business case there, we do it. It's amazing. Lots of analytical functions, and then addressing all the use cases. Got a great session on data democratization. Very, very cool with C-Spire. Okay, so I'm going to hand it off to Scott now. I'm going to dive into the full day agenda at the end. The only thing I'll mention is just everything is outside here, so you don't have to go too far. And please get the most out of this conference. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let me pass it off to Scott now, Vice President, General Manager of Vertica.
Thanks, man. All right. So first of all, just want to, again, reiterate what Jeff said, and thank you all for being here. I know You know, it's kind of weird traveling right now, and some of you have probably really kind of gotten back into it. You know, I've been on a few trips, but it's strange how quickly you forget almost like how to do it. I find myself standing in the airport line. I'm like, which line do I even get in? And I mean, I'm a guy that's traveled my whole career, so I know it was probably a little more difficult than normal to get, you know, whether it's getting approval or just, you know, figuring out flights. But we are really excited to have all of you here face to face with us. It's amazing. You don't realize how much you've missed it until you kind of get a big group together and you realize how much more you can actually accomplish face to face. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. And we're excited to share with you what we have prepared for the day. Just to give you a quick introduction, again, my name's Scott Richards, General Manager of Vertica. I've been with Vertica now for about 6 months. And so about 6 months ago, I was running a different business unit within Micro Focus, and the Micro Focus CEO, Stephen Murdoch, came and said, hey, I'd like you to, you know, shift your energies a little bit and focus on Vertica. And I was really excited. I was really excited to do it. Vertica had been you know, I'd known about Vertica, and it was always kind of the piece that we were investing in, and it was exciting, and they were hiring, and you know, we were throwing money at it, and I really, you know, I wanted to be involved in that, so I was excited to do it. And then I came on board, and I went to the first CAB meeting, and I just was kind of a fly on the wall at the CAB meeting. I hadn't even been announced yet, and I listened to the excitement that the customers had about the product, and it was pretty unique. Just really complimentary, excited about the technology. The team seemed really engaged, so I got a little bit more excited. And then I started to dig into the tech, and all of you know this better than I do, but the Vertica technology is just amazing. I mean, it's second to none. The scale, the performance, it's just a fantastic technology core to build a business on. So I got more excited, and then I got to meet the team, and I really started to get to know the leaders of Vertica that are working every single day on this product and working for you to try to make sure you have the solutions you need as customers. And then my excitement was kind of off the charts. This is a group that literally wakes up every single morning thinking about how they can make Vertica better, how they can take care of their customers. It's an amazing group. I've very rarely seen the passion for providing solutions to customers that I see in this Vertica team. Exactly the kind of group that I wanted to be a part of. And since then, it's been really fun to even get to know these guys and gals better. And truly, they are working every day on your behalf. So much appreciated. The other thing that's really exciting about Vertica for me is just the industry that we're in. It's crazy to think about, but this kind of DBMS market has surpassed $80 billion now. And just in 1 year, it grew $14.5 billion. And they expect this to double in the next 5 years. We truly are in the largest IT sector in the industry, which is just really exciting for me to be a part of. What's interesting about that, though, is that even with all of that investment that customers and organizations are putting into their database and putting into their data, there's only about 30% of those companies that have actually figured out how to get value out of that data. They're investing all this money, they have these huge databases, but they're just not getting any value out of that data. And you know, so you got to kind of ask yourself, why is that? Why are companies spending so much money on accumulating all of this data, but they're just not getting any value out of it? And you know, the fact that you're in this room and that you are a Vertica customer, hopefully, you're already one step ahead of the game. You're one step ahead of your counterparts in other non-Vertica organizations because you've made a decision to leverage Vertica to get some insight, get some value out of your data, which is fantastic. But what we want to show you today is how you can even get more value out of that data, how you can leverage Vertica in different ways, maybe even some ways that you haven't thought about, to really get value and make data-driven decisions that can impact your company, your organization in a positive way. That's what this whole conference is going to be about. We want to do just that. We want to make it easier for you to get value out of your data. So, you know, Vertica customers, if you look at the research that's been done, Vertica customers already get real, true value out of their data. In fact, a Forrester research study showed that the ROI from using Vertica is about 385%, which is fantastic. And you can see the numbers. Real value, millions of dollars of value comes from leveraging the Vertica solution. We want these numbers for your organizations to be even bigger. That's what we're all about. So we're gonna show you today how we can make this investment even more valuable to your organization. Okay, so one of the things you're gonna learn, and one of the things that I learned about the Vertica team, and I mentioned this earlier, everyone in this organization is customer driven. More than any organization I've ever been a part of, they're very, very customer focused. And you're going to feel that today as you hear people like David and Stephen present. You're going to feel their passion for you as customers. Jeff mentioned the customer advisory board. And I've been a part of a lot of customer advisory boards. Some have been a very positive experience. Some have been a borderline dangerous experience. I've been in some customer advisory boards where the mood has not been super positive, to say the least. We had an amazing customer advisory board yesterday, a fantastic group, just really the only goal there is to be partners and figure out how we can move along this journey a little bit better together. I started out that CAB meeting yesterday really with a challenge to the CAB that I wanted to really focus on what we need to do better. Where do we need to improve? It's nice to hear all the things we're doing well, but in order for us to improve, we need to hear what are we not doing well? Where do we need to get better? And so we really focused on that, and we got a lot of great feedback from the CAB. And we know there's areas we need to improve. We know that our upgrade process isn't quite good enough yet. We need to work on that. It needs to be easier. It needs to be more reliable. Stephen's working every single day to try to make sure that happens. We're dedicated to making sure that our deployment models are flexible and that you have choice there, so that you're not locked into one model. And we're going to get better there. We're focused on that. We want to improve the way that we deliver and support our software in all aspects of that. And we have plans, and we're going to share some of those plans with you over the course of the day. So in order for you to really get data into Vertica more easily, in order for you to manage that data once it's in the system, and then, most importantly, in order for you to get that data out and get insights out of that data, we are making huge investments into Vertica. So this is a business within Micro Focus that is getting the attention, it's getting the investment. And that's really exciting. So just a couple things to call out. For example, we've recognized that the user experience needs to improve, and I could say that about literally any software product on the face of the earth, right? It always needs to get better, and we know that we need to get better with that user experience. We've invested in a user experience center of excellence where we've gathered the top minds from across the industry, from across Micro Focus. We've consolidated them into a group. We have people in Belfast, Ireland, all over the United States that are focused on nothing but the user experience of Vertica. We have Ro, who's going to speak to you later today, who is the CTO. And Ro's been the CTO since before I got here. That was his title. But Ro is really focused on kind of specific engineering tasks within the organization. We've changed that. So we've shifted Accelerator into Stephen's organization so that we're focused on Accelerator as a core product within the engineering group. That's freed up Ro to spend his time doing big things, right? So Ro, and not just Ro, we've actually built an entire team to support Ro in thinking, what do we need to do in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? What problems do we need to solve for our customers that maybe they're not even aware of quite yet? And so Ro's going to talk about that vision later today, but super excited to have him taking on that role as the CTO. We are hiring all across Vertica. We're being very creative. We're hiring in any geo that we can find. COVID sort of opened up a new world in terms of where we can hire, and it's kind of unlocked some doors. So we're being very creative in who we hire, and we're hiring across customer success, engineering, support, marketing, you name it. We're building this team, and we're excited to do so. You know, we're investing in things like SaaS and machine learning. We're investing in the customer success organization, and this team is growing, and the investment's growing in Vertica. You know, we're super proud again this year to announce our technology partnership with Jaguar Racing. This is a super exciting partnership for us. If for no other reason, they make super cool cars and they make a cool race car, and so we're excited to have a partnership with them. And it's fun to have a partner where, you know, they're literally using Vertica for all of their data analytics on these amazing high-tech race cars, where, you know, when you think about it, performance for them is literally the difference between winning and losing. And they've chosen Vertica to be that piece of their business, which is fantastic and exciting. So, you know, over the last 6 months, I've spent a lot of time talking to customers. I really wanted to dive in and kind of understand, what do the customers think about Vertica? What do they like? What do they not like? And as I've talked to customers, you know, it's been clear that, you know, across the board, customers love this technology. They're you know, customers are really passionate about them. I mean, to some of the customers I've talked to, it's almost like a religion. You know, they can't stand the competitor's product, and they just love the Vertica tech, which has been fun for me to hear, and it makes me really proud when I hear customers talk about this being an amazing product, and that it's the easiest product to manage that they've ever had, and it scales beyond anything that they've ever used before. Just really proud of the team that's built this over, you know, the past many, many years. And as I've talked to these customers and analysts, you know, they often ask me and ask Jeff, you know, what's the #1 value proposition that you have within Vertica? And we have a lot. There's a lot of things that spring to mind when you get that question. And we have just massive scale. Scale it's almost unbelievable the way we scale, and just blazing fast performance, which is a huge advantage for us. But I think what sometimes we forget is the flexibility that Vertica provides. When you think about Vertica, we have the broadest deployment and consumption model, and we have the most options of anyone on the market. So, you know, we want to make sure that we scale and we can adapt with whatever happens in your kind of data journey along the way. If you want to choose a different way to pay, you know, we're open to that. If you want to deploy in the cloud or hybrid or in a private cloud, whatever you want to do, we're there for you. If you want to, if your consumption model is kind of a normal license model, we're there. Most of our customers now, by the vast majority, are choosing to go with the subscription consumption model, which is fantastic. It saves on OpEx. It's a great way to do business. We're happy to do it that way as well. If you want to be self-managed, we can do that. If you want to be part of a SaaS deployment model, that's great. And all of this comes within one unified analytics platform, which is very unique to us. And we're going to talk more about that as we go through the day-to-day. So I don't want to steal all of Steven's thunder. He's looking at this slide saying, "Wait a second, this is supposed to be mine." But as general manager, I'm gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about this. You're gonna see some announcements today on Vertica 12, which is our new release that's coming out, and you're gonna see we're changing the game in terms of advanced analytics and machine learning. New functionality across that. Analytics. You're going to see better analytics than you've ever seen before. We're going to have more support for object stores like our partners at Vast Data, and super excited to have the Vast Data team here as our platinum sponsor. So thanks again for being here. Excited for what the future holds as we look for new opportunities and new solutions. And of course, all of this is delivered with the highest levels of performance that you've all come to expect, and with security that is always top of mind. And I didn't mention this, but we actually, another change over the past few months is we actually have a dedicated chief security officer, a dedicated office that's working on ISO 27001 and beyond, and we're taking security to a whole new level, which we know is table stakes in this game, right? We have to do that, and we're putting our investment behind that effort. So again, I'm stealing people's thunder here. I apologize. Ro's going to talk about this, but I'm super excited about the vision that Ro is going to share today. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of a teaser, this vision is all about kind of 3 pillars. The first pillar is in the middle. We want to make it as easy as possible to actually load data into Vertica. And we want to provide as many pipelines as we can to get as much data into Vertica as we can. And then once it's in Vertica, it's all about managing that data. And we have a huge investment in making sure that the developer experience and the automation is there so that you can easily manage that data. And then probably the most important piece is what we talked about earlier, making sure that you can get value and insight out of that data. There's no reason to have these giant data stores if they just sit there and we don't get value out of them. We want to make sure you can monetize that asset. So Ro's going to talk about that. Again, sorry to steal your thunder, Ro, but I'm excited about that vision. So as always, right, this event is about customers. And so we encourage you to hear from our customers, and that's what this Unify event is all about. So, C-Spire is going to do a presentation on data democratization, and I'd encourage you to all hear that. We've got Mass Mutual that's going to talk about how they do their data analytics without sacrificing any of their security through some of the encryption technology that they're leveraging. It's going to be a fantastic presentation, so I'd encourage you to all attend that. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce another really special customer that we're excited to have. That's Bert Corderman of the Trade Desk. And he's going to share how they are meeting crucial analytical data platform requirements with Vertica. Bert is a senior manager at Trade Desk. He's skilled in storage area networks and in enterprise software and in agile development methodologies and in storage. He has a master's in information technology from the George Washington School of Business, which is awesome. But probably the most amazing thing about Bert, the thing that I'm the most impressed with, is that Bert's actually competed in multiple Ironman triathlons, which if you don't know what an Ironman triathlon is, it's not for the faint of heart. So when I saw him wearing his Ironman shirt, I got pretty impressed with Bert right off the bat. But with no further ado, I'd love to introduce Bert from the Trade Desk.
There you go. Excited to be here. You guys are all excited to be here also? This is, I will say that the Vertica Conference, Unify Conference, whatever we want to call it, it is my ultimate favorite conference of all time. I think I came to, I don't know, my first one 8 years ago. Kind of put me in the place where I am today. I think at the time I was working at Symantec. I spoke at that conference. A couple guys from Trade Desk came up and like, hey, we're doing ads. I'm like, how big's your company? It's like 100 people. I'm like, nah. Like, I'm not ready to do another startup. And probably should have gone then, before they were public. But kept in contact. Went there a couple years later. So it's take advantage of meeting with your peers. Go talk to the vendors. It's a way to talk to them and run away if you really want to run away. I'm gonna go talk to the VAS guys because we have some use cases that we're interested in looking at. So let's get started here. So kind of just very, very brief kind of what I'm responsible for. So we have lots of machine-generated data, probably about 5,000-6,000 hosts globally that just constantly churn out text data. So I'm responsible for the teams that keep that data flowing, responsible for the processing of that data, creating our Parquet data lake, responsible for our data warehousing team, which is primarily Vertica. In some future slides, I'll kind of show some of the other tech that we're using as well. Responsible for our customer data set. So lots of data coming in. Customers want that data. They want to interact with it through web visualizations, which we use Vertica for as well, but sometimes they just want the raw feeds of data, so my team is responsible for that as well. So anyone familiar with ad tech? Yes, no? All right. So before I started at Trade Desk, I didn't like ads, and they're not my favorite thing, but I have a different view on it today. It's you know, if you think about advertising, it's the currency of the internet. You know, things aren't free, especially as things move more and more content generation from streaming systems, from television streaming systems. That stuff has to get paid for, right? And it's all about choice, right? So, you know, I pay the extra $5 a month so I don't have the ads on Hulu. But if you're going to have ad-supported content, relevant ads are better than non-relevant ads. And nobody likes to see the same ad 8 times in a row. So, you know, at a very high level, our goal is to make that experience better. So kind of before I jump into kind of the specifics of my environment, I kind of like to reflect back on kind of some of what I think are some of the pivotal changes over the last, 10 years or so. And, you know, some things change, but some things stay the same. I think some of the most pivotal things that has happened in the last 10 years is kind of the HDFS, Cloudera, and Hortonworks. I'm sure there's some people in the audience today that run on-premise HDFS, but I did it for a little bit. It's a lot harder to do than what it was sold to be. I think that very quickly got surpassed by S3. S3, which it kind of took over from HDFS systems. I think it's one of those things where there's lots of options today where different people support the S3 interface. So there's a lot of flexibility for customers that they don't have to use Amazon S3. They can use other products S3. Separation of compute and storage is huge. I mean, there's still systems out there today that like have storage and the compute coupled together. But those systems, you inevitably end up wasting something. You have too much compute or too much storage. The Trade Desk 4 years ago, when we implemented Vertica Eon, we had a requirement to have a data set that we weren't going to delete for 5 years. We're about 6 months away from that. And if we had to build a cluster in the traditional way, we'd have hundreds and hundreds of nodes to actually store all that data. So it was pretty important for us. So kind of this is what at a very high level, what our environment looks like today. We have lots of different database systems. We use Aerospike as our key value store. That's a very integral part of our real-time bidding. We have multiple different batch systems. We use Snowflake, we have Databricks, we have EMR, and of course we have Vertica. So this is the Vertica conference, so I'll be talking mostly about Vertica, but come grab me and I'm more than happy to talk about any of these other systems as well. We run some fairly large Vertica clusters. We have 2 640 node clusters. We're constantly ingesting in data, loading every 5-10 minutes to lots of different tables. Can you grab my water for me real quick? We run a lot of reporting off of Vertica. With Vertica Eon, we're able to scale those clusters up and down, so we're not paying for them to run all the time. So why so many different stacks? It's important as a practitioner that you understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different systems. You're constantly going to have some new engineer that I worked with this system before, and it worked great in this system. You gotta resist the urge to just bring in a new system for every single use case, because you'll never get anything done. Just understanding the strengths of your systems. For example, Aerospike is a key value store, the best key value store out there. So just making sure that you're implementing things for the right reasons. What is your scale of data? Really, how you need to deploy your systems. The Trade Desk today, we have majority of our systems in AWS. Prior to Eon, we ran on-premise. We have some systems in Azure, and we're potentially looking at doing some on-premise. So that's one of the key values that Vertica brings to us is being able to deploy however we want to. Okay, so kind of in terms of the scale of data that we're dealing with here. So our clusters are about 15 petabytes uncompressed. We are fortunate to have 2 of them. When I started at the trade desk, I was very pleased to know that we had 2 systems loading the same data. It allows me to sleep at night. We're allowed to upgrade one goes offline. Our business still runs. So that 15 petabytes is duplicated once on the West Coast and once on the East Coast. So multiple tables we load to. We're loading about 600 billion rows daily, 30 terabytes compressed, which is about 150 to 300 terabytes uncompressed. Our largest reporting table is over 21 trillion rows, probably 22 now, and close to about a petabyte in size. Our primary use case for reporting, we execute about 40 reports per day, and again, across our 640 node cluster, which we were able to shut down 18 hours per day. So again, why do we choose Vertica Eon mode? Deployment flexibility. We really wanted to be able to deploy wherever we want to. Separation of compute and storage again. Having that really cheap S3 storage and being able to bring the data in and out as needed, having certain data go to certain subclusters really gives us a ton of flexibility. Again, Vertica is rock solid. I mean, I've been using Vertica for like 10 years. Throwing lots of concurrency at it, it just works. So sometimes that's important. Control over the systems is pretty important to us as well. A lot of these systems, a lot of cloud systems, it's one size fits all. It's like, you can have a small or an extra large or whatever, but what about depot caching? Well, you don't really have to worry about that. It just works. But we've made a lot of changes to our system over the last couple of years, especially with the depot. We found that S3 is great, but it's not low latency. Our systems, when we're scaling up our subclusters, I mean, we're pulling data at about 120 gigabytes a second, so it provides massive throughput, but the network is slower than local storage. That's something that does not change. So we do a lot of caching in depot. Our primary ETL cluster has about 3 petabytes of local disk space to allow fast caching. But having that flexibility of, you want to do EBS, you want to pick different instance types, you can do that. You got to be careful. You have to know what you're doing, but it gives you that flexibility. So another reason, back to the basics, projections. And this is something that really excites me about Eon. When I was at Symantec, I had one table that was really big, and I had a super projection. There wasn't enough space. Like, space on disk was at a premium on a traditional deployed cluster. But now with subclusters and Eon mode and some other things I want to talk about, projections become a feasible thing to do. Some of my largest tables, I think we have a table that's 300 billion rows and has 12 projections on it. And it really comes down to, well, why would I have those projections? And you really have to understand the basics. This is probably, I would say, one of the most important things to understand with Vertica is, what do the projections give you, and how do I use those to optimize the workload that I'm running? How do I order the data? If you don't know what a group by pipeline is, and you have getting big data sets, go figure out what that is, because it really helps you manage your memory on your cluster. Segmentation, right? We're embracing data movement now. The depot is in local, but it comes from S3. Data's moving around. That's great, but data movement can be the enemy of queries. Like, if you have to resegment your data for every query, like, you're going to have problems. And that's probably one of the key things that we do with a lot of our projections is segmenting our data so that we don't have data movement during query time. Talk a little bit about special projection types, live aggregate projections. Allows you to put a group by on a table, which is, the query gets rewritten automatically, which is great. There's a new projection type called a partition range projection. Anyone hear those before? Yes? No? All right. All the Vertica people should be raising their hand. That's something that we've been asking for a long time from the trade desk. Because we have these tables that are 20 trillion rows that have 5 years of data. If I looked at the chart of like the access patterns, 95% of my queries are over the last 30 days. So even with an aggregate projection, I'm not going to create this huge projection on this huge table. It's just not efficient. But now with the partition range projection, I can create those projections for the last 30 days. Again, I'll call it the relative simplicity of the system. It's not the easiest to use, right? But when things are completely easy, you have no control, no flexibility. You do have to learn how the system works. But it's also not the most complicated system to use either. I think it strikes a good balance between the two. All right, future plans with Vertica. I think we're looking at on-prem Vertica with Vast, right? All right. We're looking at some additional data modeling things. I think in an ecosystem where there's lots of different vendors, being able to interop between all those. We're looking at Iceberg and Delta Table. Vertica is going to help us support those, I'm sure, at some point here soon. Trying to figure out, like, we're spending all this money on reporting. We have these really big tables. I think a lot of it's going to come down to some more modeling around. We haven't implemented any of the aggregate range projections. It's going to be coming out at some point, but we're going to be looking at those to kind of help with our reporting. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Bert. Great, compelling use case. Appreciate you sharing the story. Next, I want to bring up Stephen Walkauskas, Director of R&D, and David Sprogis, Director of Product Management R&D. They're going to talk about Vertica 12. So here you go, buddy.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good morning, Stephen.
Morning, David.
Morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Vertica 12. It's not quite out the door yet, so I have to show you this slide. We make every effort to deliver on our commitments, but nothing we say today should be taken as a commitment to delivery. Vertica's success is due in large part to our customer relationships, to you, to our Vertica community. You help us develop, extend, and refine all of the features and capabilities of Vertica. Every conversation we have with you, every support ticket that you file, and even your most challenging use cases help us to make Vertica a better product. Two special members of our community, Chris Cotton from C Spire and Joe Gonzalez from Mass Mutual, will be sharing their stories with you later on today. I encourage you to join their sessions live or catch them on video later. Community also drives our open source. We also have sessions this afternoon for Kubernetes and Vertica Pi. I hope you'll catch those as well. Great stuff. We're grateful for your support, and on behalf of the company, I thank you for your confidence in Vertica and our collaboration. Confidence in Vertica, future-proofing. That's what Vertica 12 is all about. From left to right, we continue to drive broad deployment options. For analytics anywhere, including advanced analytics and machine learning on a platform designed for performance and stability. We offer new deployment options, Accelerator and Kubernetes. We've added to our ML and advanced analytics story, and we've made performance and resiliency improvements, which is always welcome with big data. Stephen Walkauskas, head of R&D, will take us through what's new in Vertica 12. Stephen?
All right, thank you, David. All right, when you think of Vertica, especially after hearing Bert from the trade desk speak, you think of scale, performance. You think of performance and scale. But also important to that equation is efficiency and your total cost of ownership, right? If you need something to go faster, you can't just throw more hardware at it. You've got to make those algorithms more efficient. You've got to tune the system so that it behaves well, right? Otherwise, you're just throwing money away by throwing more hardware at a system that isn't well tuned. Because you know better than I do that if you build a data warehouse that's successful, that people get value from, not only is the data going to grow, but the number of users on that system, they're going to increase as well, right? We all know that. So what we're looking at here is a benchmark that was done using the Berkeley benchmark by the McKnight Consulting Group, comparing Vertica to Snowflake. And you can see with just a single query, the Vertica performance is already significantly better than Snowflake. But what you observe here is that as you scale up to just 10, 20 concurrent queries, and think about when you load a dashboard page, that's not just one query that's going against the database typically. It's usually half a dozen or so that are being issued concurrently. There are always concurrent queries running against any useful data warehouse. So it's got to be able to scale. And you can see the performance difference of Vertica scaling against Snowflake. So that's a benchmark, right? But let's look at a real world use case. This is from a proof of concept that was done recently by a job search engine comparing Vertica and Snowflake. They had a long list of performance criteria that they wanted the vendors to meet. And Vertica came close on or significantly exceeded all of the criteria. Snowflake didn't come close on a single one. And so here we're looking at the number of the queries in the 90 percentile, the ones that were the 90 percentile of the performance over a workload that's running 200 concurrent queries. Vertica was 10 times faster than Snowflake. The query throughput was 4 times more in Vertica than in Snowflake. And the real kicker of it all is that Vertica was running on 1/4 of the hardware that Snowflake was running on. 1/4 of the hardware, 6 nodes compared to 24. Cost difference in that is significant. The product enables this to happen. We have the tools in the product, as Bert was talking about, partition range projections, which I'll touch on in just a bit. But we need the database engineer to be knowledgeable in how to wield those tools effectively to get this kind of value out of Vertica, right? So in this case, we had a very smart engineer. Snowflake, of course, on their side, they were tuning their database for this workload as well. And we were still able to achieve much better performance through the use of flattened tables, live aggregate projections, putting expressions on projections, resource pools, and so forth. But you need that knowledge of how to use the product in order to wield it most effectively. Partition range projections, as Bert was talking about. I'm really excited about this feature coming out in completeness in Vertica 12. We've added support for live aggregate projections to the partition range projection. But what I'm showing here in this chart is the amount of data retained as you go back in time. So if you're retaining 24 months of data, when you're loading data at 2 terabytes a day, that's about 1.5 petabytes of data. That might be too much to have. Well, Trade Desk is fortunate they can have 5 projections on a table. But the more projections you have, the more the storage footprint, the cost of that increases. And if you decide that you want to add a new projection, there's the refresh that you have to go through in order to sort the data for that projection, to optimize it for a variety of query workloads. What partition range projections allow you to do is specify a range of the partition that you will store the data for that projection. So you can say, I'm only going to retain the most recent month or past 2 months of data in this projection, right? So at a fraction of the storage cost, you can have many more optimizations on your projection. When a query comes in, if the predicates in that query refine to a slice of data that's within that partition range, then the optimizer can use that projection for its optimization. So you get amazing performance benefits with a fraction of the storage cost before this feature was available, right? Just another tool that you have in your tool belt. Chuck doesn't go into this in detail in his presentation, but he covers a lot more of the performance improvements that we've made recently and where we're going in the future. So I encourage you to attend his talk following this session. Another feature that I wanted to talk about that's new in 12.0 is that we have support for greater resilience in Eon databases. When the primary subcluster goes down, the secondary subclusters remain up. We've lost quorum at that point, which is the decision-making process to make sure that we have a virtual or distributed agreement across the cluster. So these clusters, they remain up in read-only mode. You can run a read-only workload against them. At the same performance, there's no performance impact because we have good workload isolation. You can continue to run your read-only mode against the subclusters that remain up. The primary subcluster, we didn't just stop at this resilience. We then allowed, I'm looking for Alex in the room who worked hard on this feature, but we allowed that primary subcluster to be upgraded to a newer version of Vertica, and it can be brought up. The subclusters communicate through control messages with the primary subcluster, but they don't observe changes that are made to the catalog, so data that's loaded. So now that that primary is up, it's read-write, you can make changes. The secondary subclusters remain fixed to the snapshot that they had when the primary went down, right? But of course, you can then take those down, upgrade them, and bring them back up. You can see where this is going. We can now support, and we have in Kubernetes, an upgrade process where a read-only workload is not disrupted by the upgrade. But why deal with upgrade at all, right? Take your Vertica database, put it into Accelerator, and let the Vertica site reliability engineers handle the operations, including upgrade, other resiliency, recovering nodes, and so forth. Let them take over the operations of your database. And we've hired a DBA with more than a decade of experience operating Vertica databases in production. So let our expertise provide guidance for using things like live aggregate projections, resource pools, partition range projections. Put it into Accelerator. Let us handle the complexity of operating the Vertica database at large scale in production. You focus on the business logic and building applications to get value out of your data. As Bert and Scott and Jeff has said earlier, one thing that clearly sets Vertica apart is flexibility in deployment mode. Find another analytic database out there that allows you to deploy nearly as flexibly as you can deploy Vertica. You can do it on-premise in Eon mode. You can do it a hybrid or in the cloud. And regardless of the way you're deploying Vertica, there are improvements in Vertica 12 that are going to have a positive impact on your experience. So we've made core improvements, some of which I've talked about. Improvements to Kubernetes. We've integrated Prometheus and Grafana so that you can do monitoring. The upgrade process that I just talked through is available through Kubernetes as well. We've continued to make significant enhancements to improve the customer experience in Accelerator, the database as a service that I mentioned on the previous slide. And we've added support for H3C's OneStore and Vast Data's Object Store to the product in 12.0 as well. To hear more about these sorts of cloud enhancements, deployment, flexibility enhancements, attend Ro's talk later today on the future of Vertica in the cloud. And finally, the developer experience remains an area of focus for us. And by this, I mean making it easier and more secure to build applications on top of Vertica. So if you have developers on your team who are building a web service in JavaScript, we now provide a Node.js. Hi, Bill. We now provide support for Node.js. And we've done this in the open source so that it's a community-driven project. But we now support Node.js, which allow those developers to connect to Vertica through web service. Also in the open source, we have enhancements for Apache Spark. That's a project that's been running probably now for about a year. We continue to make improvements, authentication through Kubernetes, and so forth. We've also added for our clients OAuth 2 support for authentication to provide another mechanism for authenticating the clients to Vertica. We've increased and improved the charting capabilities of Vertica Pi. And we've made significant improvements in complex data types, including the ability to store complex data types in ROS. Also have a nifty feature that allows you to look at a JSON file and infer the table definition from the JSON file, making it easier to load JSON data into Vertica as well. And for more on the topics of machine learning, visit Botter's talk later today. And to hear more about complex types, visit my session at 4:20 this afternoon. I've only skimmed the surface of what's available in 12.0. There's not a lot of time to go into detail on each of the features. So I encourage you, there are a lot of members of my team here, many of them much more knowledgeable because they're hands-on in a particular area than I am. So I encourage you to seek out people who have worked on these features, the Vertica engineers, throughout the day during this conference. Look for the press release that Jeff had mentioned for the 12.0 Vertica press release. Visit the website, and of course, attend the sessions, the engineering-led sessions and customer-led sessions. I think it was a great story that Bert told about how he found his job at Trade Desk through the Vertica conference. So you never know what that networking is gonna where that's gonna take you. Appreciate everybody's time. I mentioned Vast Data a couple of slides ago. I'd now like to hand it over to John Mao from Vast Data to talk about that technology.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I've heard terms like performance and scalability and concurrency and subclusters. I'm not a Vertica expert, but those are all major tenets that we value at Vast Data as well. So very, very excited to be here. Like Jeff mentioned earlier, title of our session is Unified Analytics meets Unified Storage. And I think we're almost like cousins in a way because we view unification similarly. The convergence of data lakes and data warehouse is happening, obviously, and something that is very unique in the capabilities from Vertica. And we similarly at Vast Data believe in a unification at a storage infrastructure level for things like data warehouses and data lakes. Vast Data, just quick show of hands. Has anybody actually heard of Vast Data prior to today, besides Vertica teams? Oh, okay. So, yeah, Jaguar and team, yeah. So of course. Okay, well, hopefully in the next few minutes, you'll have an appreciation for why we're excited about the partnership. We've just started this relationship over the last couple of months. We were actually dragged into this relationship and partnership by some customers, and we'll talk about some of those in a second. For those of you who don't know the company, we've been around for about 6 years. Clearly, we need to do more work on the marketing advertising side, but we've been selling into the industry over the last 3 years or so, and we've been very fortunate to have had pretty amazing growth and success. By some tallies from some analysts, if you look at how much we've sold into the market, I think we're now managing almost 2 exabytes of data in just under 3 years. And by most accords, that makes us the fastest growing infrastructure company ever in the history of the world of IT. And part of the reason why that's, oh, that's weird, okay. Part of the reason why that growth is happening at such a rapid pace is because we're solving a decades-old problem in the storage industry. And that problem that we're describing is this notion of storage tiering. So tiering, if you've ever worked with storage admins or worked within IT, you might be familiar with this concept of storage tiering that you see here on the gray pyramid. What it basically represents is that there's different types of storage technologies that exist at different performance and cost ratios, right? So for example, the very top of the pyramid, you might have very, very, very fast storage systems that are built out of flash and SSDs and all that goodness, but they come at a very, very expensive cost profile. So while they're great in performance, they're very expensive. The net result of that is customers can only deploy a very limited, finite amount of capacity using those technologies. On the bottom of that, if you walk through this tier, the bottom of that is the complete opposite. You have archive storage technologies, maybe they're based off of hard drives and spinning drives, or even tape drives. Those are great for storing lots and lots of data at a very, very low cost point, but they're not exactly the fastest performing media or fastest performing storage systems in your environment as well. And so they serve different purposes. And we find this problem this kind of tiering concept becoming a major problem today, because as you're looking at more advanced analytics, you're looking at machine learning technologies, you need access to a larger and larger array of data, right, in order to make those algorithms really hum. And so when you have this kind of tiering concept, it becomes a challenge for many organizations doing all kinds of machine learning or different kinds of AI as well. This is the problem that we set out to solve as a company. How do we eliminate this trade-off between performance, scalability, cost inside of the data center? All right, so why are we here at Vertica Unify, which I love the new name, by the way. When we talk to customers, we hear a couple of requirements that they're starting to see from the business, right? I think you probably are very familiar. I think the Vertica team is hitting on a lot of these points as well. And the first one is around just faster data access, right? Being able to provide faster response times in order for the business to take meaningful action. If the answers to your questions come too slow, it's usually going to be out of date. The actions you can take are probably no longer valid. The other thing that we're seeing is this big shift enabled by technologies that you guys are all working on, is this movement away from just batch analytics into much more real-time and interactive analytics as well. And a lot of that interactivity, kind of being able to look for new insights inside of data that previously questions weren't able to be asked, right? And it's now these new technologies that are coming to market that are making that feasible for the very first time. And lastly, I think we heard about this, but this idea of democratizing data within the organization is also a big thing. Enabling data across more users within the organizations to make better data-driven decisions is a big requirement for executives at most of the companies we work with. Now, the challenge is that some of you may have seen or already facing today is that many times there's a couple of things holding back this new modern analytics agenda. The first one is that there are some legacy systems that may be sitting in your environments today that don't have the performance, don't have the concurrency to keep up with some of the demands of your business from an analytics perspective. There's also, like I mentioned with the tiering perspective, this also manifests itself in the world of analytics. You end up having different silos of information stuck in different silos of infrastructure. So bridging that and giving kind of a complete view of the data is oftentimes very, very difficult and challenging to do. And lastly, of course, everyone here, if you had an unlimited budget, then a lot of these problems wouldn't really matter. But everyone works within a budget that you're given. So managing costs, both from an acquisition perspective, but also from an ongoing operations perspective, especially at scale, when the data volumes are growing rapidly, that becomes a big focus area for customers as well. Now, historically, you probably still have a lot of these solutions deployed inside of your environment today. Bert mentioned Hadoop and HDFS being challenging is a nice way of putting it, being able to support. But regardless of what technology you're using, whether it's HDFS or different kinds of object storage systems, there are a lot out there, or even traditional legacy enterprise NAS storage systems, all of these three categories, from an architecture perspective, they still force customers to make a trade-off choice between performance, scalability, and cost. And this is why we wanted to enter this market and why we're choosing to work with Vertica on this specific problem. We've built a single scale-out storage system that is fast for any type of query, whether you're talking about data warehousing, whether you're talking about data lake and query engines, at any kind of scale. From a capacity perspective, we sell very, very large storage systems for customers that have lots and lots of data. Think petabyte scale, but we've architected the system for up to exabytes as well. I think our largest customer is storing something like close to 300 petabytes within a single system, just to give you some context there. The system is also multi-protocol, so we heard a lot about S3 being a cloud-native storage protocol, but you can also have an S3 storage system on-prem as well, using systems like ours, and there's other vendors that do this as well. But we also support NFS, SMB. We're a standard enterprise IT storage system at the end of the day, but with some unique characteristics that we'll talk about in a second. We've also been close partners with different kinds of advanced computing technology companies like NVIDIA, for example, where we have lots of optimization. So as you're moving into faster, accelerated computing infrastructure, we have lots of built-in optimizations for that as well. And then last but not least, if we didn't solve the economics problem, then all of what I just described is probably interesting but not relevant. Our goal as a company is ultimately to make storage, fast storage, as affordable as possible. And we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to do that through lots of different techniques. I won't have time to go into all of them today, but happy to chat in more detail afterwards. Now, what makes our system unique at the end of the day is actually enabled through our architecture. So, while all the storage logos that you saw earlier on the slides, while all of us are S3 compatible from a storage interface perspective, underneath the hood, there are some very important differences. Again, I won't have time to go into all the details here, but the differences here in terms of the benefits that we enable through our architecture are pretty significant and meaningful. Number one, we talked about kind of this concurrency, right? Performance at scale. That's a big tenet for us, something that we care about. We have an architecture that's embarrassingly parallel for all types of reads and writes, queries, ingest, etc. We also have this concept called composability, where we can define different kinds of QoS and segmentation. I'll talk about that in a second when we show some examples with what we can do with Vertica. And lastly, the thing that the architecture enables is support for new types of hardware, especially from a storage media perspective, that allow us to drive the cost of all-flash storage down to the point where we're rivaling a lot of archive storage systems that are built using hard drives as well. Okay, so that was the intro to the intro of the company. Version 12 supports now, Vertica version 12 supports now VAST as a object storage target. We had an announcement, I think, also last month or maybe 2 months now ago, where we released our support as well from our side for Eon mode inside of Vertica. And when we talk about unified storage, this is what we mean. Being able to use Vertica as the unified analytics platform to support both data lakes and data warehousing is great from an application from a compute perspective. What if you could get the same benefit from that on the infrastructure side for storage as well? And that's what we're looking to offer here, and that's what we built. So imagine now being able to use Vertica, maybe 2 different deployments of Vertica clusters, but having the same storage infrastructure, a single stack that can now support high-performance data warehousing using Eon mode from Vertica, or also as a dumping ground for all of your data lake data that comes in that can also equally be accessed via external table support and so forth from Vertica on the same infrastructure. Now, one of the benefits of that from a data pipeline perspective is that you no longer have to actually worry about moving data across physical systems, which can obviously give you a significant kind of simplification from a data management perspective. So whether it's ingesting data into a VAST cluster, whether it's doing ETL on that data, whether it's storing some of the read-optimized file formats from Vertica for data warehousing, whether it's storing Parquet data so you can access from other parts of your data pipeline, all of that can be radically simplified with a single infrastructure system instead. One of the other things about the disaggregation, the separation of compute and storage that Bert mentioned earlier that may not be obvious is that you get this nice kind of scale in and elasticity, right? It's all you have 18 hours a day where your 640 nodes are offline, right? That's amazing. I mean, that's truly amazing. And being able to do that, kind of scale in and scale out based off of your requirements dynamically is very great from a Vertica perspective, but you also need to make sure that whatever storage systems you're choosing on the back end can also meet that level of concurrency and parallelism as you scale in and out. That's one of our sweet spots. Again, come talk to us afterwards if you're interested in how that works, but we have a couple of unique things that we do to help improve the concurrency and scalability in that kind of a scenario as well. And lastly here, talked about composability earlier, and I think you guys talked about this in the context of subclusters, right? So being able to do that. We have a couple of mechanisms, a feature that we call server pools, where we're able to segment performance across Vertica cluster boundaries in this example. We can give you guaranteed isolated performance from a storage perspective for each of your Vertica clusters. So as you're spinning up different clusters for different purposes, maybe you have one cluster that's for ingest, maybe you have one for read-only, massive concurrency, kind of read-only use case. Maybe you're spinning up clusters for different departments within your organization. Whatever the use cases that may fit for your team and for your company, we actually have a couple of unique features that can help provide better performance and guaranteed performance for each of those Vertica clusters as well. All right. An example of a customer, actually a joint customer of ours, is Agoda. Last quarter, we just saw this customer make the move away from HDFS, in fact, where they're moving now to an object-based data lake, and they've chosen vast data as the means to do that. Lots of data. These are in the tens and dozens of petabytes kind of scale. But the interesting thing here is that kind of like Bert's environments and trade desk, there is support for lots of different tools. They all have sort of different purposes. One of those such tools is obviously Vertica in this particular environment, but there are other tools that are also being used for different parts of the data pipeline, all being backed by a single vast storage cluster in the back end. All right, 50 seconds, man, perfect. So that's it. It's a short introduction to VAST. We're around all day. We as a company, we started off as being a storage company. We're trying to make storage simple for most IT operators, IT organizations. But the reality is we kind of focus on different kinds of use cases. We equally want to make modern analytics simple as well. So that means faster data, right, to enable more real-time queries and real-time responses at scale. Right? Being able to eliminate lots of different infrastructure silos means less systems to manage from an infrastructure perspective, brings tremendous consolidation and cost savings as well. And then the fact that we have figured out, again, how to make all-flash storage affordable for the very first time is causing a lot of customers to rethink how they build infrastructure for analytics and underpinning products like Vertica. So we're here all day. I got Phil and Jim with me as well. Stop by. We'd love to chat and learn more about what you guys are doing. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir. Great job. Thank you, John. Thank you, Vast Data. And we've got Ro coming up next, who's going to share a little bit of a glimpse into the future of the Vertica vision. Ro, you want to take it from here?
I will take it from here. Thank you. Well, thank you, Jeff. Vertica has always been a great engine, and we'll continue to improve that core piece with performance and speed and deployment options, right? But what else can we do to make things better in the future? So, like Scott mentioned earlier, the key thing here is how do we make it easier to use Vertica in a larger context, right? So, ease of management, ease of loading data, ease of insight. Or how do you get data out? How do you get data in? And how do you make sure while you're doing all of that, you're managing it in an easy way, right? So one of the things that we are focused on around ease of management is making sure that when we are talking about Vertica as part of a larger stack, right? So we're almost always low on the stack. We have applications on top, we have middleware on top, and then Vertica on the bottom, right? In that case, how do you make sure that all of those pieces work well with Vertica at that lowest level, right? And that really means improving the developer experience, improving how we fit into that larger ecosystem. Integrations, making sure that we work as well as any other from a DevOps perspective, from a integration perspective, right? So one of the first things that we're going to be focused on is really bringing something to Vertica that we've never had before, which is an SDK that covers a bunch of APIs that allow us to interact with Vertica from a management standpoint, right? So with that SDK, we should be able to do DevOps, we should be able to do integrations, we should be able to do the interfaces with other tools and technologies that Vertica has to work with, right? And part of that is also taking some of the UX that we have that's spread across different tools and APIs and command line options, right? And in doing so, what we'd like to be able to do is make all of that UX consistent, right? So if you're using a command line tool, if you're using the API, if you're using the management console, it looks and feels the same way across the board, right? And to do that, the key piece is having this SDK and API underneath. So with that SDK and REST API, when we roll that out, what you'll get is when you have a command line like admin tools, it won't be a thick client anymore. It'll be a thin client on top of that that same SDK, and you can now use that SDK in a different way, right? You don't need to depend on admin tools to manage Vertica. Right? And this is kind of where we started, right? We started with trying to build out Vertica as a service, and we had to do it with admin tools and command line based tools, and embedding that sort of interface in a application or in code is really hard, right? You got to send a command out to the command line, parse the result, see if something went wrong. It's not a true API. And with the SDK, we'll be able to actually give you an API that lets you manage Vertica in a larger context. So that's the first incubation or incubator that we've started. It's already kicked off. The engineering team is already working hard on this. And I think we'll be able to make it much, much easier for all of you to manage Vertica in a larger context. So a little further out, Chuck and I were working on what's the best way to make it easy for customers to get data in, right? There's a number of different ways of getting data into Vertica that's cookie cutter, right? So taking an example of files in S3. Almost everybody who's used AWS and S3 has this situation. Files come into S3, you write some code to gather it up, package it, and load it into Vertica, right? And what we're thinking about is really how do we make that easy and out of the box so that when a file comes in, we watch for those events, we pick up the file, we bring it into Vertica, and you don't have to redo that code. Every customer doesn't have to redo that code every time, right? We can give that out of the box. The last one is a little more blue sky further out, is how do we make sure that we can get a interface around Vertica that's easy to use, right? And be able to get that insights and value that you want without necessarily needing to bring a number of front-end systems on top of it, right? So how do we build an integrated developer environment, and what I'm calling an analytics environment, with plugins for a SQL IDE, for machine learning tools, and be able to see all of that in one place. And I think that's something that can really change how you interact with Vertica out of the box going forward. So one of the things that's really, really great about Vertica, we support the open source world. We've done a lot in open source, and we'll continue to do that. And it's near and dear to my heart. And we want to make sure that we continue to support that in any way we can. And so watch for a announcement that will be coming out soon with our commitment to the open source world. All right, on with the show. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Ro. Thanks, Ro. Appreciate it. Okay, so just a few housekeeping items. We'll just wrap things up here. Number one is just an ask. So we've got Vertica customers here. The peer review sites are important to us. Scott covered G2. It's also Gartner Peer Insights. If you go in the back there, right in the partner showcase, there's an opportunity there to provide a review, right? And then you get a $25 Visa gift card. I won't go into the details, but if you're up for that, we'd appreciate it. And then in terms of the agenda for today, we've got a full day agenda. We've got basically 2 tracks. The engineering-led sessions are going to be held here. The best practices and customer-led are going to be run concurrently in Wyeth. So if you're stuck and you don't know which one to choose, don't worry about it. We're going to have the recorded engineering-led session and best practices session. So you want to hit those customer-led sessions if you really have to decide. Please visit our sponsor showcase. It's right outside here. You can't miss it. I want to thank our customers again and our partners, Vast Data, Arrow, Climb, and Vicinity. Lunch will be served downstairs in Grana, the restaurant downstairs. And then after everything is done at the end of today, we'll have a closing reception right outside here where hopefully we can have a drink and celebrate. So thank you all again for joining. Have a great show, and really appreciate the support.